At exactly 11:47 p.m. on Tuesday, March 15, 2023, 7-year-old Emma Martinez tugged on Dr. Sarah Chen's white coat in the emergency room of St. Catherine's Hospital in downtown Chicago. What she whispered in those next 10 seconds would save the life of Marcus Wellington, CEO of Wellington Industries and one of America's wealthiest men. But Emma's words would also uncover a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of corporate America, involving millions of dollars, environmental cover-ups, and a murder plot disguised as medical care. The truth about what happened that night remained buried for months, hidden behind hospital confidentiality agreements and sealed court documents. Tonight, we're revealing the complete story for the first time, based on FBI investigation files, hospital security footage, and exclusive interviews with the people who lived through these extraordinary events. This is not just a story about wealth and power. This is about how a child's innocent observation exposed a web of corruption that had been operating for years, and how the quietest voice in the room became the one that mattered most. Before we start this incredible story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. To understand what happened that Tuesday night, we need to go back 3 hours earlier, to 8:30 p.m., when Maria Martinez was beginning her night shift as a cleaner at St. Catherine's Hospital. Maria had been working at the hospital for 6 years, always the evening shift because it paid slightly more, and every extra dollar mattered in the Martinez household. Emma wasn't supposed to be there that night. The 7-year-old should have been home in bed, but her babysitter had canceled at the last minute, and Maria couldn't afford to miss work. So Emma sat quietly in the family waiting area, doing her homework and coloring in the books her mother brought for her. This wasn't unusual for Emma. She had spent countless hours in hospitals throughout her young life. Born with a rare genetic condition called hereditary fructose intolerance, Emma required regular monitoring and specialized treatment that cost the Martinez family nearly $3,000 a month, even with insurance. Emma had learned to be invisible in these hospital corridors. She knew which nurses would smile at her, which doctors walked too fast to notice children, and she had developed an unusual ability to observe the world around her with remarkable detail. Her mother often said Emma noticed things that adults missed. That night, as Maria worked her way through the 3rd floor, Emma remained in the waiting area, watching the controlled chaos of the emergency department. She had no way of knowing that her presence there would soon become the most important factor in saving a man's life. At 9:15 p.m., Dr. Sarah Chen arrived for her shift. Dr. Chen was a dedicated emergency physician who had been working at St. Catherine's for 8 years. She was known for her thoroughness, her compassion for patients, and her willingness to question standard procedures when something didn't feel right. Dr. Chen had grown up in a working-class family herself. Her parents had run a small restaurant in Chinatown, and she understood the weight of financial pressure that families like the Martinez family carried. She had noticed Emma during previous visits and always made sure to acknowledge the quiet little girl with a wave or a smile. None of them knew that their paths were about to intersect in a way that would change all of their lives forever. At 11:31 p.m., the emergency department doors burst open. Marcus Wellington, 52 years old and worth an estimated $2.3 billion, was rushed in on a stretcher by his private medical team. The CEO of Wellington Industries, a conglomerate that owned manufacturing plants, environmental consulting firms, and real estate developments across the Midwest, was unconscious and in severe distress. Wellington had been attending a private dinner at Le Bernardin, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, when he suddenly collapsed. The initial reports suggested severe food poisoning, but his symptoms were progressing rapidly. Violent vomiting, severe abdominal cramping, and a dangerous drop in blood pressure had his personal physician extremely concerned. Dr. Chen took charge of Wellington's care immediately. She ordered the standard protocol for suspected food poisoning: 4 fluids, anti-nausea medication, and blood work to check for bacterial infections. Wellington's personal security team and his assistant, Jennifer Morrison, crowded into the hallway outside his room, making phone calls and coordinating with the hospital administration. What Dr. Chen didn't know was that Wellington had been scheduled to appear before a congressional committee the following Thursday. He was prepared to testify about environmental safety violations at manufacturing plants across Illinois and Ohio. His testimony was expected to expose a network of fraudulent environmental reports that had allowed dangerous chemicals to contaminate water supplies in at least 14 communities. Wellington had spent the previous 6 months gathering evidence, working with environmental lawyers and federal investigators. His decision to become a whistleblower had been weighing heavily on him, especially because his own company had been involved in some of the violations years earlier, before he had taken steps to correct them. But Wellington's decision to testify had made him enemies. Powerful people who had profited from the environmental cover-ups, people who had millions of dollars at stake, people who would do anything to prevent that congressional hearing from taking place. As Dr. Chen worked to stabilize Wellington's condition, Emma Martinez sat in the waiting area, 30 feet away from the emergency room where the CEO was fighting for his life. She was coloring in her workbook, occasionally looking up to watch the unusual activity in the hallway. Emma had seen important people come to the hospital before. She had learned to recognize them by the way they dressed, the way other people acted around them, and the number of people who followed them. But something about this situation felt different to her. Maybe it was the way the security guards kept looking around nervously. Maybe it was the hushed, urgent conversations happening just outside the patient's room. Or maybe it was something else entirely, something that Emma's young mind was processing in a way that the adults around her were not. As the hours passed, Wellington's condition should have been improving with standard treatment, but instead, he was getting worse. His blood pressure continued to drop, and he was experiencing confusion and disorientation that Dr. Chen found concerning. At 12:45 a.m., Maria Martinez was cleaning the floors near the emergency department when she noticed Emma had moved closer to Wellington's room. The little girl was sitting in a chair against the wall, still coloring, but Dr. Chen could see that Emma was paying attention to everything happening around her. "Emma, honey, come back over here," Maria called softly, not wanting to disturb the medical staff. But Emma stood up and walked directly to Dr. Chen, who was reviewing Wellington's latest blood test results at the nurse's station. The child tugged gently on the doctor's coat, just as she had done many times before when she needed to ask a question about her own medical care. Dr. Chen looked down at Emma with a tired but genuine smile. "What is it, sweetheart?" Emma looked toward Wellington's room, then back at Dr. Chen. "The rich man's fingernails look like my grandpa's did before he got really sick." Dr. Chen paused. She knew Emma's family history well. Emma's grandfather, Miguel Martinez, had died 3 years earlier from complications related to arsenic poisoning. He had lived in a rural community in Mexico where a mining operation had contaminated the local water supply. The poisoning had gone undiagnosed for months because the symptoms had been attributed to other causes. "What do you mean, Emma?" Dr. Chen asked, crouching down to Emma's eye level. "The white lines on his nails," Emma said simply. "And his skin looks yellow like Grandpa's did." Dr. Chen felt a chill run through her. She had been focused on treating Wellington for food poisoning, following standard protocols, but she hadn't looked closely at his fingernails. Mies lines, white horizontal lines across the fingernails, were a classic sign of heavy metal poisoning, particularly arsenic poisoning. She stood up and walked back to Wellington's room, this time looking at her patient with fresh eyes. Emma was right. Wellington's fingernails showed clear signs of Mies lines, and his skin had a subtle yellow tint that could indicate liver distress from toxic exposure. Dr. Chen immediately ordered additional blood tests, specifically testing for heavy metals including arsenic, lead, and mercury. She also ordered liver function tests and an electrocardiogram to check for cardiac effects of potential poisoning. The test results would take 45 minutes to come back from the lab. During that time, Dr. Chen found herself thinking about Emma's grandfather, about the symptoms of arsenic poisoning, and about the fact that Wellington's condition was not improving with standard food poisoning treatment. She also found herself wondering about something else. If Wellington was suffering from arsenic poisoning, how had he been exposed to it? Arsenic poisoning was extremely rare in the United States, especially among wealthy individuals who had access to clean water and high-quality food. Unless, of course, someone had deliberately given him arsenic. At 1:47 a.m., the blood test results confirmed Dr. Chen's worst fears. Marcus Wellington had dangerously high levels of arsenic in his bloodstream, levels that indicated acute poisoning rather than environmental exposure. Someone had deliberately given him a lethal dose of arsenic, and without immediate treatment, he would be dead within hours. Dr. Chen immediately began chelation therapy, a treatment that helps remove heavy metals from the bloodstream. She also administered supportive care for his liver and cardiovascular system, which were both under severe stress from the arsenic. But as she worked to save Wellington's life, Dr. Chen realized she was facing a much larger problem. If someone had poisoned Wellington, that person might still be in the hospital. They might try to finish what they had started. And they might target anyone who had discovered the truth about what was happening. Dr. Chen called hospital security and requested that they review all security footage from the evening, particularly focusing on anyone who had access to Wellington's room or his medical supplies. She also requested that Wellington's room be placed under guard, officially for privacy reasons but actually for his protection. What the security footage revealed was deeply disturbing. At 10:22 p.m., nearly an hour before Wellington arrived at the hospital, Dr. Vincent Carmichael, the hospital's chief administrator, had entered the emergency department and accessed the medical supply room where 4 bags and medications were stored. Dr. Carmichael was not scheduled to be at the hospital that night. He typically worked day shifts and rarely involved himself in emergency department operations. But there he was on the security footage, alone in the supply room for nearly 8 minutes. Further review of the footage showed Dr. Carmichael returning to the hospital at 11:45 p.m., just 14 minutes after Wellington arrived. He went directly to Wellington's room, claiming to the nursing staff that he was ensuring the hospital's most prominent patient received appropriate care. Dr. Chen knew Dr. Carmichael well. He had been the chief administrator for 12 years and was known for his attention to the hospital's financial operations and his relationships with wealthy donors and board members. But she also knew that Dr. Carmichael had been under significant personal and professional stress recently. 3 months earlier, Dr. Carmichael had been named in a medical malpractice lawsuit related to a case from his previous hospital. The lawsuit was seeking $15 million in damages, and Dr. Carmichael's insurance would not cover the full amount. He was facing potential financial ruin and the loss of his medical license. More significantly, Dr. Carmichael's younger brother, David Carmichael, owned an environmental consulting company called Midwest Environmental Solutions. This company had been responsible for producing environmental impact reports for dozens of manufacturing facilities across Illinois and Ohio, including several plants owned by Wellington Industries. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together, but Dr. Chen needed more information before she could act on her suspicions. While Dr. Chen was investigating the security footage, Emma Martinez had made another observation that would prove crucial to understanding the full scope of the conspiracy against Marcus Wellington. Emma had been watching the people coming and going from Wellington's room, and she had noticed that Dr. Carmichael had switched Wellington's 4-bag during his visit. At the time, Emma thought it was normal medical care, but she mentioned it to her mother when Maria came to check on her during a break. "Mama, the tall doctor changed the bag on the pole next to the rich man's bed," Emma said casually. Maria Martinez had worked at the hospital long enough to know that chief administrators typically did not perform nursing duties like changing 4 bags. She also knew that Emma was remarkably observant and rarely mistaken about what she had seen. Maria found Dr. Chen and quietly shared Emma's observation. Dr. Chen immediately had the current 4-bag tested for contaminants, and she also requested that the discarded 4-bag be retrieved from medical waste for analysis. The results were conclusive. The 4-bag that Dr. Carmichael had installed contained a concentrated arsenic solution that would have killed Wellington within 2 hours. The bag that Emma had seen him remove was clean and contained only standard saline solution. Dr. Chen now had proof that Dr. Carmichael had attempted to murder Marcus Wellington. But she still needed to understand why, and she needed to ensure that Wellington would be safe while he recovered. The answer to the why question came from an unexpected source. Jennifer Morrison, Wellington's assistant, had been trying to reach Wellington's lawyers throughout the night to inform them about his hospitalization. During one of these calls, she learned that Wellington's planned congressional testimony had been leaked to several industry publications earlier that day. Wellington was scheduled to testify about fraudulent environmental reports that had allowed manufacturing companies to dump toxic chemicals into water supplies across the Midwest. His testimony would specifically name Midwest Environmental Solutions as one of the companies that had falsified environmental impact reports in exchange for payments from manufacturing companies. David Carmichael's company stood to lose millions of dollars in contracts and faced potential federal criminal charges if Wellington's testimony proceeded as planned. Dr. Vincent Carmichael had learned about the planned testimony through his brother, and they had decided that the only way to protect David's company was to prevent Wellington from ever reaching that congressional hearing. The plan had been elegant in its simplicity. Dr. Carmichael would poison Wellington during what appeared to be a routine medical emergency. The arsenic would be administered through 4 fluids, making it nearly impossible to detect unless someone specifically tested for heavy metal poisoning. Wellington's death would be attributed to complications from food poisoning, and the congressional hearing would be postponed indefinitely. The plan would have worked perfectly, except for one factor that the Carmichael brothers had never considered: a 7-year-old girl who had learned to recognize the signs of arsenic poisoning because of her grandfather's death. At 3:15 a.m., Dr. Chen made the most difficult decision of her medical career. She contacted the FBI's Chicago field office and reported the attempted murder of Marcus Wellington. She also called the Illinois State Police and requested that Dr. Vincent Carmichael be arrested for attempted murder. Dr. Carmichael was still at the hospital, ostensibly monitoring Wellington's condition and coordinating with the medical staff. When FBI agents arrived at 4:22 a.m., they found him in his office, frantically making phone calls and destroying documents. The arrest was swift and decisive. Dr. Carmichael was taken into custody on charges of attempted murder, conspiracy, and tampering with medical equipment. Search warrants were immediately executed at his home, his office, and at the offices of Midwest Environmental Solutions. What investigators found exceeded their worst expectations. The Carmichael brothers had been operating a criminal enterprise for over 5 years, accepting payments from manufacturing companies in exchange for falsified environmental reports. They had covered up chemical spills, toxic waste dumps, and water contamination that had affected thousands of people across multiple states. The environmental crimes were serious enough, but the attempted murder of Marcus Wellington represented an escalation that shocked even experienced federal investigators. The brothers had been willing to commit murder to protect their criminal enterprise, and they had come within hours of succeeding. As news of Dr. Carmichael's arrest spread through the hospital, Maria Martinez became increasingly worried about her family's safety. She knew that powerful people were involved in the conspiracy, and she feared retaliation against her and Emma for their role in exposing the truth. Dr. Chen shared these concerns and worked with FBI agents to ensure that the Martinez family was protected. Emma and Maria were moved to a safe location while the investigation continued, and security was provided at their home and at Emma's school. Marcus Wellington, meanwhile, was making a remarkable recovery. The chelation therapy had successfully removed most of the arsenic from his system, and his liver and cardiovascular functions were returning to normal. He was conscious and lucid by Thursday morning, and he was briefed on everything that had happened during his hospitalization. Wellington's reaction was a mixture of gratitude, anger, and determination. He was grateful to Dr. Chen for saving his life and to Emma Martinez for providing the crucial observation that led to his proper treatment. He was angry about the attempt on his life and the broader conspiracy that had put thousands of people at risk. And he was determined to see that justice was served, both for the attempt on his life and for the environmental crimes that had been covered up for years. On Thursday, March 23, exactly 1 week after his poisoning, Marcus Wellington appeared before the House Subcommittee on Environment and Climate Change to deliver his testimony about environmental crimes in the Midwest. His appearance was even more powerful because of what he had endured to be there. Wellington's testimony was comprehensive and devastating. He provided detailed evidence of fraudulent environmental reports, illegal dumping of toxic chemicals, and systematic cover-ups that had been orchestrated by companies like Midwest Environmental Solutions. He named specific companies, specific locations, and specific individuals who had participated in the conspiracy. But Wellington also did something unexpected during his testimony. He talked about Emma Martinez and the crucial role that a 7-year-old girl had played in exposing the conspiracy. He described how Emma's observation had saved his life and had led to the discovery of crimes that might have continued indefinitely without her intervention. Wellington announced that he was establishing the Emma Martinez Foundation for Environmental Justice, with an initial funding of $50 million. The foundation would provide legal assistance to communities affected by environmental crimes, fund medical treatment for victims of toxic exposure, and support whistleblowers who came forward with evidence of environmental violations. The congressional hearing lasted 6 hours and resulted in immediate action by federal agencies. The Environmental Protection Agency launched investigations at 47 sites across 6 states. The Department of Justice announced a task force dedicated to prosecuting environmental crimes and protecting whistleblowers. Dr. Vincent Carmichael and his brother David were indicted on federal charges including attempted murder, conspiracy, racketeering, and violations of the Clean Water Act. They faced potential sentences of life in prison without parole. The impact of Wellington's testimony extended far beyond the immediate criminal cases. Environmental regulations were strengthened, whistleblower protections were enhanced, and communities across the Midwest finally received the cleanup and medical assistance they had been seeking for years. 6 months later, the effects of that Tuesday night at St. Catherine's Hospital continue to reverberate through multiple sectors of American society. The Carmichael brothers were convicted on all charges and sentenced to life in prison. 43 other individuals were indicted in connection with the environmental crimes conspiracy, and hundreds of millions of dollars were recovered for affected communities. Dr. Sarah Chen was recognized by the American Medical Association for her ethical leadership and investigative work. She continues to work at St. Catherine's Hospital, where she has established new protocols for detecting and treating poisoning cases. Maria Martinez was promoted to a supervisory position at the hospital and received a full scholarship fund for Emma's education through college. Emma's medical condition is well managed, and she continues to display the remarkable observational skills that made her the unlikely hero of this story. Marcus Wellington recovered completely from his poisoning and has continued his environmental advocacy work. The Emma Martinez Foundation has provided assistance to over 300 families affected by environmental crimes, and has funded the cleanup of contaminated sites in 17 states. The case has become a landmark example of how environmental crimes can escalate to violence, and how the most vulnerable members of society often hold the keys to justice. Emma Martinez, a 7-year-old girl from a working-class family, had observed what trained medical professionals and federal investigators had missed. Her whispered words to Dr. Chen that night had saved a man's life, exposed a criminal conspiracy, and ultimately led to environmental justice for thousands of families who had been suffering in silence for years. Sometimes the most important voices are the quietest ones. Sometimes the most crucial observations come from the most unexpected sources. And sometimes, a child's innocence and honesty can overcome the most sophisticated criminal schemes. Emma Martinez proved that night that heroism comes in all sizes, and that speaking up about what you observe, even when you're just a little girl in a big hospital, can change the world in ways you never imagined. The truth, as Emma's story shows us, has a way of emerging when people have the courage to pay attention and the strength to speak up, no matter how small their voice might seem.